In this chapter, we're going to create the staircase. The focus on creating the staircase is really to understand and learn groups and components, as well as further use the Follow Me tool to create the railing and use the Move Copy tool. The first thing we're going to do is understand why we use groups and components and when to use just groups, or when, in this case, just to use components. And what I want to do is just orbit over here, just in our model space, and just show you a little exercise. I'm just going to draw a little riser here. I'm going to use Move Copy to have 3 copies here. Take the Select tool, and I'm going to select the middle one and make it a group. I'm going to triple click the last one and make that a component. And I'll get into the specifics of components, but you can name them here. Just going to copy these. When we are creating staircases, you'll notice the 3 staircases almost look identical. So you have just the stray geometry, the groups, and the components. Stray geometry makes it very difficult to modify and adjust. If you want to make any changes to one tread or one riser here, it's really a challenge because everything's connected. If you accidentally delete something, you start to lose geometry here. Groups give us the ability to isolate our geometry, which is great, but you'll notice as I'm only making changes on one group, it's not making any changes on the other risers here. And that's where components are great. For example, here, we can just draw some detail, and it's going to make the effects or changes on any duplicate of that copy. You can also make components unique. And then that way, if they're different for some reason, or you want it to be unique, you can do so and make changes to that, and the rest of the geometry for other elements retain their own information. If you're familiar with AutoCAD, these work like blocks. Actually, when you import a AutoCAD block, it is converted to a component. And it's a great little feature, especially if you're importing furniture or trees. You can swap or replace one component with every single instance in your model. Saves a lot of time. So this is really creating the staircase is pretty easy. Let's first just take a look at our model and view up from the top of that staircase there. I measured the staircase, so it is, if I take the tape measure, draw from this line here, it is 9 3/4 of an inch, and then it drops 8 inches down. So with the guide there, just take the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle over that shape, and very important part here, before you extrude this goes with groups or components, but specifically in our case here with components. After I draw that first piece of geometry, if I know I'm isolating in this, go ahead and just make it a component right away. Makes it a lot easier to select later on. So we can right click, select Make Component. We can name the component. In this case, let's call this stair. You can also give it a description. I typically don't give my models descriptions here, but you can if you like. There are alignment settings, specifically for glue-to settings. This is helpful for when you have sloped roofs or elements that you just want to glue to a specific axis, like windows or skylights. You can also set the component axes. By default, it's going to set it in the bottom corner. For 2D face me components, so these are like people that you can have in your model or trees, you can always have them face the camera. The key here is just make sure Replace Selection with Component is checked, and then click Create. Like a group, it selects a little blue window around the model. You can go ahead and just double click on that to enter the component. Take the Push-Pull tool and push this down 8 inches, and then take the Select tool and click out of the component. Again, I can select it or deselect it. Orbit down and into the first floor just to take a look. The next thing that we have to do is use Move Copy to duplicate and repeat our stairs on the bottom here. Take the Move tool, make sure Option or Control is selected, and copy it from the top corner right here down to the corner here. Without using another tool, just going to orbit so I can see the first floor. And because that was my last command, I can type in a duplicate. So if I want, let's say 12, the letter X, and then hit enter, it's going to replicate our copy 12 times down the wall there. So I realize 12 isn't enough. Let's try 14X, press enter. Maybe one more, 15X, enter. In this video, we're going to add more detail to the staircase. Since we created each stair as a component, we can now just modify one tread or riser, and our changes will be replicated in all the instances of the model. Let's zoom in first to any tread here. Go ahead and double click to enter the individual stair. The first thing that we're going to do is take the select tool, hold down shift, and select both these two lines. Click the move tool, turn option on or control, and copy this down 1 inch. Take the push pull this out 1 inch, double click to repeat our push pull. You zoom back, you'll notice it's making the changes on all of our stairs. Now we need to figure out how the back end of this works, and there's some detail within the staircase that we want to create. So let's orbit, and let's draw a line just to end this point here. We don't want that going all the way yet. Take push-pull and push this with option or control on a PC. That way it leaves this face here, this edge. And as we push this, we're going to push it to the beginning of our next stair. Right there. Take the eraser and just erase this edge. And now we're going to use the move tool and move this line over in the green axis until it snaps to that beginning edge. Go ahead then and erase this edge. And now there's a little overlap here. So take the push-pull this out 2 inches. The last detail in our stair here, let me just bring the photo up. As you can see, you have the top tread, so that's 1 inch. This little trim piece, which we're not going to worry about. What I want to create though is this curved piece. I'm not too concerned about the level of detail. I just want to replicate it and get it pretty close. So let's leave the photo there. Let's move our window over a little bit. This is where dual screens really help, if you have them. Let's take the line tool, draw a line down about 1.5 inches, say 1.5 inches over. And what I like to do for the curve, I'm going to start at this point here, use the arc tool, and just try and create a similar version of it. And the blue line is showing up. That way it's actually tangent to this edge that we previously drawn. Looks pretty good right there. Next, take the line tool and just draw a small little line down, 0.25. And last but not least, just another arc. Let's actually take the move tool and let's move this line over a little bit. There we have it, pretty close. Take the push-pull tool and just push this out 1/8 inch to give it a little bit of detail. The last thing that we can do is create this trim that's here. To do that, let's take the line tool, draw a line from here. Now notice how it's not snapping or aligning. You hover your cursor over this edge, it'll snap to this magenta color. That lets us know that we're actually parallel to the line that we're tracing. You can go ahead and push that out 1/8 inch as well. Take the select tool and just click outside the stair. And there's a couple things that I want to do before we end this section. In this video, we want to make the bottom landing unique. First, select the component with the select tool and right-click, and you'll notice an option that you can make this component unique. When you make a component unique, now when you double-click and enter to make changes, you'll notice it only makes it to this definition. If you take a look in your window components, you'll see it duplicates and makes a new definition of the stair. You still have the ability to modify the original component. Now I'm going to show you a picture of the landing here, and you'll see it's unique in the sense that it has this curved shape and it also extends out. It took me a couple weeks to get used to because that first landing is a little bit tricky. It adds a nice architectural element to the staircase and really makes it look more appealing and attractive. Since we have this component now unique, let's double click and enter inside. Let's clean up the push-pull tool by pushing this back to here, and then taking the eraser and just erasing these edges. Next, push-pull this out, and I'm just going to push-pull it out far. It's approximately 12 inches, but to make this easier to model, we're just going to push this out. You can also then push this back. You can erase these two edges. And let's push this out 4 inches. Next, just take the arc tool, start in this corner here, and we're going to fake this. So we're just going to try and get it as close as possible. So right about here, click. And then we want just a subtle curve, not too big. You don't want it to go over that edge. You want to keep it on the face. We'll draw this curve out. In this case, we're going to keep this to the tangent so that it stays cyan. Look at that, we're pretty close. And we'll set that down right there. Now, since we removed the element underneath, good trick is to make sure you erase any additional geometry. If I didn't erase this line, when we go to push-pull this, it's going to leave this face here. See that line there? Undo. Erase this line. And now when we push-pull, you'll see it removes that face nice and clean. Take the select tool, hold down shift, and select the three edges. Our left one, this front one, and the side one here. Click on the offset tool and offset this 1 inch. Now take the push-pull. Before we can push-pull this face down, we need to remove this edge here. So just select this from right to left and press delete. Now we have a clean surface that we can push-pull this face down until it hits the floor, about 8 inches. Let's click out of the component. Go ahead and draw a rectangle on the ground here. Double click and press G to make it a group, and double click to enter that group. Take the push-pull tool and push this up right until you hit that tread there. We're going to push this out to there. And let's push this back so that it ends up at this face right here. What we're doing is we're creating the little bit of drywall that's here before the staircase opens up down to the basement. Remember, you can use Control H to hide the rest of the model. In this case, we're going to take the move tool, hold down shift, move this all the way down to here. Control H again. Move this down so you align right there. And it just takes a little bit of back and forth. Select this entire face. Move this in the green axis till it snaps right there. Last but not least, just take the push-pull and push that all the way through. Now this piece actually extends, so what we can do is make this bottom stair unique. In this video, let's add more detail to the staircase by adding the spindles that go up every third step. We'll start with this one here. We're going to zoom in. We're going to take the tape measure tool and draw a line or guide 2 inches and 2 inches off this corner here to get that point. Next, take the circle tool, draw a circle that's a 1/2 inch in radius, 0.5, then hit enter. Now, like previous components, I like to make these a component right away. So double click to select the geometry, right click, make this a component, and go ahead and just name it. Make sure replace selection with component is checked, and click create. Go ahead, double click, enter that component. Take the push-pull tool and push this up 32.5 inches. That's the height below the top railing. While we're in the model here, let's click on the paint bucket and just give this a dark black texture. I usually don't like going completely dark black. I'll bring it up a little bit just so it's maybe 80–90% gray. The reason why is you can actually see the line sometimes and just gives it a little extra detail. We can delete our guides, go into Edit, Delete Guides. And now we can pre-select the component, click on the Move tool, make sure the little plus sign is on using Control or Option on a Mac, and copy this from this point here. So click once, and it's every third step. So we're going to click here. Next, I can type in 4x and press Enter to duplicate our spindles. Now I noticed up here we have a little bit of an error with our last step, so let's go ahead and make this unique and clean it up a little bit. So let's right click on the component and make it unique. Double click to enter the component. We're going to unhide the rest of the model so that we can see everything. And you may have to go back and forth just to get your bearings correct. So we want this, draw like that. And then we can push-pull this whole piece through because we don't need that. Select from right to left and press delete just to delete that extra geometry. And if I hide and unhide, let's take the push-pull, push this in, flat with that surface. Let's push this flat and erase this extra geometry we don't need. This is okay. It's not really ideal to have this stray geometry, but it's an element that we're not going to see. So let's push this back, push this back. Now we're flush to that edge. To finish off the spindles here, let's take the Move tool with Control or Option on a Mac and copy this 2 inches over, orbit, and there's one spindle here. And then there's one at the end. Let's copy this all the way down till we reach the end. And then instead of 2x, we can do 2 divide and press enter. And that will divide our copy with a multiple between it. You could type in 4 divide, 6 divide, and so on. In this case, we only need 2. And it's a weird math. The copy is considered 1, and then the copy between is considered 2. So when you're dividing that, always include the additional copy. We have the spindles. Now we need the bottom spindle. We can take this one and move copy it down to the bottom edge. We can also quickly create our cutout. Just going to move this rectangle down 8 feet. Sample with the paint bucket tool just to make that a white surface. I'm not going to create any of the stairs going down. You certainly can, but it'll just give us a visual of what that's starting to look like there. We can, however, close out of this group, so you may have to orbit out. In this video, we're going to create the railing. To create the railing, there's a couple challenges that we have. One is it starts up here and we need a profile that's going to draw all the way down and then curve right at this endpoint here. And then we'll duplicate those down for this set and for the set upstairs here. To begin, first take the rectangle tool and draw on the stair here 2 inches, 0.5. And that's our profile. Take the select tool, double click on our selection, and then take the move tool and move this up from the midpoint right on that endpoint there. Next, we need to rotate this. Take the rotate tool, and you want to click and hold on your first click so that it aligns in the red axes, and then release. You can then click on the green axes and then pivot this up 90 degrees. Next, take the select tool, right click on this and make it a group. And we're going to copy this over to here. And once more down to here. Now we can do the easy ones first. Let's actually make this a component by right clicking. And we'll double click to enter it. Take push pull and just push pull this all the way to this edge here. Take the paint bucket and sample the spindle and then hold down shift to apply it to all the faces. You can click out of the component and then duplicate it down in the blue axes. We want to duplicate this down 10 inches and then type in 2x. Come back upstairs. Finish this one off real quick. So again, make this a component, double click, push pull, sample paint bucket, and then move copy down 10 inches. Now for the railing here going downstairs, let's double click to enter our profile and take the line tool and draw from the midpoint here. We're going to create a path. So we'll zoom down. And we'll draw a line just to this point here, right on that midpoint. And then continue the line. See how it shows up magenta? That's letting us know that it's parallel. We'll draw that all the way down, right about to here. And you see that my cursor is right on that endpoint there. Next, we need to draw an arc that curves here. And I find it easier if you take the tape measure tool, draw a guide from this midpoint here, and then take the arc tool. Start from the endpoint, draw from there, and then make sure your cursor follows along this path here. That way you know it aligns correctly. Take the eraser, erase that little bit of edge, and you can erase the guide as well. The profile looks pretty good. We'll hide the rest of the model. That way we can just see our profile and our path. Take the select tool and select from right to left the 2 lines that make up the path. And then just zoom in, click the follow me tool, and just click on the profile. Going to create our railing here. We can then unhide the rest of the model, sample, and then apply the texture. Let's click out of that and make this a component by right-clicking. And then, as we did for the other 2, copy these down 10 inches and 2x. Now that we have the railing complete, let's move on to the next video where I'll show you how you can nest grouping components to better organize this staircase. In this video, we want to organize the model and nest the staircase components and groups into one item. What happens in our model, if we look at the outliner, you can see we have the groups of just the first floor and second floor that we organized earlier, but now we have all these individual little groups. We have these railing definitions for the components, and they're all individual elements. To keep this organized and to keep it all together, we can nest all of these groups and components into one group called the staircase. Easiest way to do that is with the select tool simply just want to select your elements. So we will use the select tool with Shift to select multiple objects here. In the first case, we're just going to select all of the railings and spindles. So with all of those selected, we can now right-click and make this a group. Let's now select all of the stairs. You can either press G or right-click and make this a group. And as you can see in the outliner, we now have these two groups, railings and the staircase. And depending on your model preference, you could keep those separate. So you can hide and unhide those. Or I prefer just to keep that all together. So we'll select both of them and then group that. In our group definition then, we can right-click and rename this and call this entire element the staircase. We can rename this group as well. Call this the railings. And rename this one. Call this the stairs. Now that's really just a personal preference. You don't have to use Outliner to rename your groups. It helps if you have more complex groups and you need to quickly move through items. So that's it for this chapter. The next thing that we want to do is create the windows and doors. And I'll show you a couple techniques in creating those, as well as a great plugin that will make creating trim, windows, and openings a lot quicker and a lot more detailed.